Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us all on the June 2022 edition of the Cloud Foundry Community Advisory Board call. We have a bunch of very interesting updates from the community. For those who've been following closely, it's been a year since we elected the inaugural Technical Oversight Committee, and we've had the opportunity to conduct the first election to fill in seats that we are now starting to rotate, and it's time to announce results for the elections that were held last week. Also, as part of the agenda for this call, we have, I think, a very brief update, or rather reminder, about the Cloud Foundry event that's coming up. We don't have a whole bunch of updates yet, but just want to remind folks about dates, and if you're wondering about logistics and things like that, we can chat about that. And then finally, I guess the meat of the call is meant to focus on some Korifi architecture documents that were prepared by the community in the past week or so, and generally have a discussion about the Korifi project as it stands. Chris, do you want to walk us through the first topic, that is about the TOC elections?
Sure, yeah. I'll be posting to CFDev shortly, and I've got a pull request in to update the results to the community repo. But the results for the election, we're going to see Ruben Koster from VMware, Behan Veli from SAP, and Andy Hunt from cloud.gov.uk. And so we're very excited to have them join. And that keeps about the same balance as the exact same balance as we had previously. Eric Malm from VMware and Stephen Marker from SAP will continue on for another year. They're still on board, and their seats will be up for election 1 year from now. So yeah, I'll share that more widely with the community later today, but just figured we'd give you an update on that now. So congrats to everyone who's now on the TOC.
Yeah, we'll ratify all of this during the next TOC call. I think we are also due to elect a new TOC chair, which I guess will also happen in the coming weeks. And yeah, once that's set, I think the new TOC will begin their 1 year term well before July, I guess. But yeah, remains to be seen. Okay, next sort of quick update, a reminder about the event that we're scheduling. So just some points to recall. First of all, it's going to be a 1-day single track event co-located with KubeCon North America. So that's either the 24th or the 25th of October 2022. So we have either the Monday or the Tuesday. We don't know which yet, but I guess we will soon. And so it's going to be a 1-day event, like I mentioned. Obviously, that also means that we have to cram in like a lot of different tracks and different segments to the event, which are all in sort of the planning phase right now. So as soon as we know the date, and as soon as we nail down some other logistics about the event itself, we'll be sending out notifications about CFPs, about getting some papers and submissions in from the community. But I've had like a couple of inquiries from different people, especially from some of the bigger organizations, about dates and some of the other logistics. So I'm just going to quickly share my screen, open up sort of the KubeCon NA website. And go over some of these things. So like I mentioned, the week of 24th to 28th October is KubeCon. If folks are having any difficulty seeing my screen, some of you just let me know. Um, so the venue is at Huntington Place, which is in downtown Detroit. There's a bunch of different hotels here, a lot of which are actually booked fully. So if you're looking for places, I would encourage you to do it sooner rather than later. So there's a tab for co-located events here under program, which is where some of the events are already listed. So we have to get the CF event listed here. We're not sure yet whether it's going to be on the Monday or the Tuesday preceding KubeCon. So, and we're speaking to the LF events team and the CNCF events team to have all of this information, and it's it'll hopefully be here soon. But in either ways, the KubeCon website has all of the information that you require in order to um, plan travel, book hotels, and what have you. So I would encourage everybody to take a look at this and get started on event plans ASAP. Chris, you have anything to add?
No, we should know, get confirmation and get a date in the next couple of weeks, certainly by the first week in July. So really look forward to that. It's hard to share a ton of details until you know the day of, but yeah, I would recommend, I mean, I'd love to see as many people come as can. So I would recommend, checking out hotels sooner rather than later. I know that Sunday has booked up in some cases, and since we don't know whether we're on Monday or Tuesday, it'd be great to get hotels booked as soon as possible. But we'll share a lot more about this in the next 2 weeks or so with the community. Thanks, Rick.
Cool. So any questions participants on the call have about elections, election results, event day, etc.? Going once, going twice. Okay. So let's move on to sort of the bigger pieces of the call. I don't intend for this to be a very long presentation, but I thought it's important to sort of highlight some of the updates that are happening as we speak, and also give a walkthrough of what what Korifi, what the Korifi team has been up to in the past week or two, I guess. So about a month ago, we released an important milestone, the 0.1.0 tag. So we sort of labeled this as our beta release, and we put some pressers out. We had a lot of social media information out about this, and we ran like a bunch of different efforts to create some awareness about the tool. Now, since then, a few things have changed. I'll go into some of the details during this call about what are some of the sort of big changes. Obviously, our issue backlog has been pretty active, which is great. Again, the Korifi team meets every other Tuesday for a community call that's focused on getting Cloud Foundry to work with Kubernetes. So if folks are interested in this area, then I would highly recommend people to jump in on that call and make it to the discussions that happen there. So what I wanted to focus on during this call, though, is about some of the information that is being presented about Korifi architecture. So specifically, a bunch of documents have been created in order to communicate this architecture in as much detail as possible, and to let folks know about um, what exactly it is that is constituent of Korifi, and what's running inside, and how it can be used, etc. So this sort of is like the main diagram that represents uh, the tool itself. So as you can see here, it illustrates that there's a client that actually connects to the service, and then this service is basically triggering two kinds of workloads. So there's a run workload, but before that, I guess there's a build workload, which actually takes the code, does the conversion into an image, puts the image on a container registry that's here, and then the run workload grabs it from here and puts it on the container runtime. So the community is hard at work documenting all of this information and building some images and some resources that people can make use of to understand this better. So the reason that I wanted to bring this up during the call today is twofold. A, obviously, to communicate the architecture of Korifi itself, and B, to see if there are folks who are listening here who want to jump in on some non-code contributions and learn this better, document it better, or help improve whatever documentation that we have. I just wanted to welcome such contributions as well. So like I mentioned, the core components, so I'm going to read off of the screen for a bit here. So the and again, feel free to interrupt with any questions that you might have, or any points that you might want to add, or any corrections that you might want to make. So I was talking about the core components, and the core components that make up Korifi are a bunch of Kubernetes resources. So the custom resources that we make use of m- mimic the Cloud Foundry for VMs experience, because essentially they implement the V3 API logic. Now, what has changed is the interaction to these can be made directly through kubectl, or it can also happen via the CF CLI. So that, I think, is one significant change that has happened. And basically each of the different segments of what Cloud Foundry provides is a custom resource that runs on a kube cluster. The architecture basically identifies four resources here that are of more significance than the rest, I guess. So the first one is the API deployment, CRD. So I have also opened like a K9s here that is sitting over a Korifi somewhere in the back. So some of these things you'll be able to actually visually see and verify as we talk about them. Um, and so this is like the set of pods that are running as part of a Korifi deployment. So the first thing, like I was mentioning, is the Korifi API, which you can find here. And then next up, so the Korifi API is basically the interface to all of the CRDs, and it's the go-between for any of the CLIs that are connecting the Korifi API, which basically enable the different workflows. Korifi controllers are a set of CRDs that implement, like I mentioned, the different components that make up the larger CF experience. Finally, there is also a set of Korifi webhooks, which are a bunch of CRDs, which are used for enforcing rules and enforcing policies. The next sort of big piece is the build and the run segments of the whole Korifi deployment. And both of these, I guess anybody who has some idea, I guess, of projects such as Knative will obviously see the congruence here and understand that there are very similar sort of steps that the Korifi team takes as well. So the build workload obviously takes care of the build process, where the image is rendered for being run, and the run resource obviously grabs the image that is exported at the end of the build workload resource process and puts it on a container runtime. I think there's also um, a role that Irene plays here, again for the moment, and that has to be swapped out for like the build workload and the run workload resources, and that will happen soon, I guess. um, I think the authors have also emphasized how there is a lot of extensibility here, um, and there's some documents that I'll show about these being very explicit as well. Some of the dependencies, as they're defined, are some of the other sort of tools or subcomponents that are used in order to um, design and define Korifi in general. And so certs are one. There's a metric server, and I hope to do a deep dive into how the metric server can be used with different apps in a session later this year. But there's obviously a Kubernetes metric server that is also deployed as part of Korifi that can be made use of. Kpack is, I think, a very um, how can I say, it's very intrinsic to this community, and it builds on the cloud native build pack specification in order to export that OCI compatible image. Um, Contour is the ingress. I think the CF for Kate's project, which was there previously, made use of Istio. I think a lot of research has gone into why Contour, and consequently Envoy is a much more appropriate solution. And if folks are interested in reading a little bit about that, I'm happy to show where they can. And finally, um, service bindings are taken from the Kubernetes project as it is, and it's basically used with some of the services that are needed and things like that. So these set of dependencies again are largely quote unquote borrowed from other open source projects and other Kubernetes SIGs, I guess, and made use of natively by Korifi. Okay, so far, I guess. Any questions, please let me know. The next sort of piece is is a slightly more in-depth discussion about three areas. Um, I'll start from the bottom because it represents like a rather significant deviation from before. So Cloud Foundry on VMs typically used droplets, and they've moved away from these droplets for Korifi, and instead, like I've mentioned, I guess a few times on the call before, OCI compatible container image is what is exported. This OCI image is put on a container registry, which I think is again something that folks are quite used to as a paradigm when using Docker. Um, it was like Docker Hub is a container registry, and you could download images from there and then use them for deployment. So it's maintaining sort of that same workflow. And it is making that possible not by using an object store or a blob store, which has also happened in the past, but instead making use of the container registry. So anytime you do a CF push, a container is exported, and that container is always uploaded to a container registry. So if you look here at um, this query fee that I have, this pod is basically used for used as the container registry. So let me see. Um, this is meant to be used as the container registry. The other sort of significant um, piece of this whole architecture is the way multi-tenancy is being implemented. So for the first version, a significant amount of effort went into creating using hierarchical namespaces, which is again a Kubernetes SIG project. So HNC, which stands for Hierarchical Namespace Controller, is the name of the project. And I guess hierarchical namespaces with what are known as sub namespace anchors were made use of for this. So I'll go into some details now because there's no sort of um, org or space in this. It's not visible, but that's essentially where I expect it to be. So subname space anchors made it possible to implement the CF definition of an org, spaces within the orgs, and so on, because Kubernetes has a flat sort of um, notion of namespaces. They do not allow nesting namespaces, and so um, whereas Cloud Foundry at the first instance, at the first step itself, requires an org and a space within the org in order to proceed even through the first steps. So it was imperative that we worked on the multi-tenancy, and what the community did was to make use of the hierarchical namespaces, but after implementing it in, I guess, true engineering fashion, they found out that the HNS implementation or the HNC implementation was rather non-performant for many of the use cases that we had. It's been documented in significant detail here. So there is a spike, I guess, much more than a spike right now, that has gone into creating a permissions model that mimics the Cloud Foundry permissions model, and to make use of a native sort of CF-ish controller in order to implement these, as opposed to going the hierarchical namespaces way. So this document has in detail what the limitations were um, when using HNCs. So I guess the ones that I personally experienced were in terms of performance, where HNCs were rather slow, and there's also some um, problems in terms of propagating service accounts into sub namespaces and things like that. Whereas I guess the Cloud Foundry controller that we have already has logic to handle a lot of these problems. There's also a link in this document to some of the work that has gone into CF orgs and CF spaces. So if folks are willing to, if folks require more information, you're more than welcome to take a look at this. So I guess the goals for this migration are to produce something that's more lightweight and reliable, while also reducing the dependency on something that another open source team is working with. And I guess the third, rather more important thing here is about authentication. And so this also represents a significant deviation from how um, CF CLI for VMs actually work. So Korifi makes use of native Kubernetes authentication. So anytime you sort of want to log in, I guess I could demo that, but anyhow, every time you want to log in, it makes use of the same interface that you would when you use like kubectl. So it'll recycle the authentication from um, the Kubernetes cluster, whatever it is that you're using. And so I think this diagram does a good job of explaining what the overview of the auth looks like, and there's some more information if folks want to again learn more about this. So but then what I wanted to highlight is um, it's a rather significant deviation from the way Cloud Foundry did it, and even from the way that CF for Kids was doing auth. um, let's see, the architecture docs also provide like a detailed mapping between some of the Cloud Foundry concepts and what is the Kubernetes analog or equivalent for some of these. So, you know, mm, if folks want to create a mind map of here's, what here are, on the left, some of the concepts that we're used to, and on the right, here are like some of the things that are new. Feel free to peruse this. And like I mentioned, a lot of the architectural decisions have come from information that's here. For example, using um, image formats is available here. And one of the reasons I like to refer to these is they always provide like a context from the CF for VMs world. So if you're used to like Bosch based stuff, you can get the context, and the delta is also highlighted. Now, like I mentioned, here's another document that provides the um, reasons for why the team picked Contour and Envoy as opposed to any of the others that were here. So all of these are also documented, again linked from the main sort of architecture doc. Um, for upcoming changes, there's a link to proposal document. So you can, if you would like to sort of review what's going on in Queryfi land, I guess these are super useful in terms of learning about what's to come. So I just wanted to share this architecture doc and sort of do a quick walkthrough so folks are aware of what's available and what they can make use of in order to learn a little more. That is that's all I had for show and tell. if folks have any questions, comments, feedback, I'm happy to take them on. There's also like a bunch of other resources that are in the works. And as we start to release these, I'll share links to them on the Slack as appropriate. But yeah, that's it for now. Thanks for listening, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Ram. That was a great walkthrough.
Ram, do you know when you might have some of these links available? Time frame
Yeah,
wise?
these are all on GitHub. People can check them out. I'll drop them into the cab Slack, or I'll send them to you on Slack as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ram.
Yeah, sure.
Anything else, Ram, or is this the end of the
Yeah,
meeting?
that's all I had. I guess we come to a close. Thanks everyone for attending today, and see you in next month's call.